In the ancient texts of Greek mythology, beyond the reach of the known world, lies a land shrouded in mystery and allure. Hyperborea, a land said to be beyond the biting north wind, where the sun never sets and the light of day graces the earth unceasingly. Hyperborea, a utopia of eternal spring, untouched by disease, hardship, or the ravages of time. A realm of unparalleled beauty and harmony, where the inhabitants lived in blissful longevity. This is not just a story of a mythical paradise. It's a tale that has echoed through the annals of history, captivating philosophers, explorers, and dreamers alike. Hyperborea, the lost paradise. Hyperborea is a mythical land in Greek mythology. According to the ancient Greeks, it was an idyllic region located far to the north of Thrace, a place where the sun shone 24 hours a day, which would place it above the Arctic Circle in modern geographic terms. The name itself, Hyperborea, translates to beyond the north wind or beyond Boreas, with Boreas being the god of the north wind in Greek mythology. The inhabitants of Hyperborea were believed to live incredibly long lives in a state of bliss, free from disease and hard labor. The Hyperboreans were thought to be closely connected to the gods, particularly Apollo, who was said to visit them every 19 years. These visits corresponded to the cycle known as the Great Year, which was believed to be a time of perfect harmony. Hyperborea was more a concept than a specific location in Greek thought. Its purported existence has been linked to historical places by various authors through time, but it's largely considered a mythical utopia, an unattainable land of perfection. This land has been variously identified with the British Isles, Scandinavia, and even locations as far afield as the Himalayas, depending on the source. The idea of Hyperborea has captured the imagination of people for centuries, and it has appeared in various works of literature and philosophy. Its concept as a distant, perfect land has been a source of fascination and inspiration in the context of both utopian visions and the search for lost civilizations. The earliest extant source that mentions Hyperborea in detail, Herodotus's Histories, dates from 450 BC. Herodotus recorded 3 earlier sources that supposedly mentioned the Hyperboreans, including Hesiod and Homer, the latter purportedly having written of Hyperborea in his lost work Epigone. Homer's provenance to the epic is suspect by Herodotus. Herodotus wrote that the 7th century BC poet Aristeas wrote of the Hyperboreans in a poem called Arimaspeia about a journey to the Isidones, who are estimated to have lived in the Kazakh steppe. Beyond these lived the one-eyed Arimaspians, further on the gold-guarding griffins, and beyond these, the Hyperboreans. Herodotus assumed that Hyperborea lay somewhere in Northeast Asia. Pindar, lyric poet from Thebes, and a contemporary of Herodotus in the 10th Pythian Ode, described the Hyperboreans and tells of Perseus's journey to them. Other 5th century BC Greek authors, like Simonides of Chios and Hellanicus of Lesbos, described or referenced the Hyperboreans in their works. The Hyperboreans were believed to live beyond the snowy Riphaean mountains, with Pausanias describing the location as the land of the Hyperboreans, men living beyond the home of Boreas. Homer placed Boreas in Thrace, and therefore Hyperborea was in his opinion north of Thrace in Dacia. Other ancient writers believe the home of Boreas or the Riphaean mountains were in a different location. For example, Hecataeus of Miletus believed that the Riphaean mountains were adjacent to the Black Sea. Alternatively, Pindar placed the home of Boreas, the Riphaean mountains, and Hyperborea, all near the Danube. Heraclides Ponticus and Antimachus, in contrast, identified the Riphaean mountains with the Alps, and the Hyperboreans as a Celtic tribe who lived just beyond them. Aristotle placed the Riphaean mountains on the borders of Scythia and Hyperborea further north. Hecataeus of Abdera and others believed Hyperborea was Britain. Later, Roman and Greek sources continued to change the location of the Riphaean mountains, the home of Boreas, as well as Hyperborea, supposedly located beyond them. However, all these sources agreed these were all in the far north of Greece or southern Europe. The ancient grammarian Simmias of Rhodes in the 3rd century BC connected the Hyperboreans to the Massagetæ and Posidonius in the 1st century BC to the Western Celts, but Pomponius Mela placed them even further north in the vicinity of the Arctic. In maps based on reference points and descriptions given by Strabo, Hyperborea, shown variously as a peninsula or island, is located beyond what is now France and stretches further north-south than east-west. Other descriptions put it in the general area of the Ural Mountains. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century AD, connected the Hyperboreans with the Gauls who had sacked Rome in the 4th century BC. Aelian, Diodorus Siculus, and Stephen of Byzantium all recorded important ancient Greek sources on Hyperborea, but added no new descriptions. The 2nd century AD Stoic philosopher Hierocles equated the Hyperboreans with the Scythians and the Riphaean Mountains with the Ural Mountains. Clement of Alexandria and other early Christian writers also made this same Scythian equation. Hyperborea was identified with Britain first by Hecataeus of Abdera in the 4th century BC, as in a preserved fragment by Diodorus Siculus. In the regions beyond the land of the Celts, there lies in the ocean an island no smaller than Sicily. This island, the account continues, is situated in the north and is inhabited by the Hyperboreans, who are called by that name because their home is beyond the point whence the north wind, Boreas, blows, and the island is both fertile and productive of every crop, and has an unusually temperate climate. Hecataeus of Abdera also wrote that the Hyperboreans had on their island a magnificent sacred precinct of Apollo and a notable temple which is adorned with many votive offerings and is spherical in shape. Some scholars have identified this temple with Stonehenge. Diodorus, however, does not identify Hyperborea with Britain, and his description of Britain makes no mention of the Hyperboreans or their spherical temple. Pseudo-Simnus, around 90 BC, wrote that Boreas dwelled at the extremity of Gaulish territory and that he had a pillar erected in his name on the edge of the sea. Some have claimed this is a geographical reference to northern France and Hyperborea as the British Isles, which lay just beyond the English Channel. Ptolemy Geographia and Marcion of Heraclea both placed Hyperborea in the North Sea, which they called the Hyperborean Ocean. In his 1726 work on the Druids, John Toland specifically identified Diodorus's Hyperborea with the Isle of Lewis and the spherical temple with the Callanish stones. Along with Thule, Hyperborea was one of several terrae incognitae to the Greeks and Romans, where Pliny, Pindar, and Herodotus, as well as Virgil and Cicero, reported that people lived to the age of 1,000 and enjoyed lives of complete happiness. Hecataeus of Abdera collated all the stories about the Hyperboreans current in the 4th century BC and published a lengthy, now lost treatise on them that was noted by Diodorus Siculus. Legend told that the sun was supposed to rise and set only once a year in Hyperborea, which would place it above or upon the Arctic Circle, or more generally, in the Arctic polar regions. The ancient Greek writer Theopompus, in his work Philippica, claimed Hyperborea was once planned to be conquered by a large race of soldiers from another island. However, this plan was apparently abandoned, as the soldiers from Meropes realized the Hyperboreans were too strong and too blessed for them to be conquered. This unusual tale might have been a satire or comedy that was preserved by Aelian. Theseus visited the Hyperboreans, and Pindar transferred Perseus's encounter with Medusa there from its traditional site in Libya, to the dissatisfaction of his Alexandrian editors. Apollonius wrote that the Argonauts sighted Hyperborea when they sailed through Eridanos. Alone among the 12 Olympians, the Greeks venerated Apollo among the Hyperboreans, and was thought to spend his winters there amongst them. According to Herodotus, offerings from the Hyperboreans came to Scythia packed with straw, and they were passed from tribe to tribe until they arrived at Dodona, and from them to other Greek peoples until they too came to Apollo's temple on Delos. He said they used this method because the first time the gifts were brought by two maidens, Hyperborea and Laodice, with an escort of 5 men, but none of them returned. To prevent this, the Hyperboreans began to bring the gifts to their borders and ask their neighbors to deliver them to the next country, and so on until they arrived to Delos. Herodotus also details that 2 other virgin maidens, Arge and Opis, had come from Hyperborea to Delos before, as a tribute to the goddess Ilithia for ease of childbearing, accompanied by the gods themselves. The maidens received honors in Delos, where the women collected gifts from them and sang hymns to them. A particular Hyperborean legendary healer was known as Abaris, or Abaris the Healer, whom Herodotus first described in his works. Plato Charmides regarded Abaris as a physician from the far north, while Strabo reported Abaris was Scythian, like the early philosopher Anacharsis. Greek legend asserts that the Boreades, who were the descendants of Boreas and the snow nymph Chione, or Chione, founded the first theocratic monarchy on Hyperborea. 6 classical Greek authors also came to identify the Hyperboreans with their Celtic neighbors in the north: Antimachus of Colophon, Protarchus, Heraclides Ponticus, Hecataeus of Abdera, Apollonius of Rhodes, and Posidonius of Apamea. The way the Greeks understood their relationship with non-Greek peoples was significantly molded by the way myths of the Golden Age were transplanted into the contemporary scene, especially in the context of Greek colonization and trade. As the Riphean mountains of the mythical past were identified with the Alps of northern Italy, there was at least a geographic rationale for identifying the Hyperboreans with the Celts living in and beyond the Alps, or at least the Hyperborean lands with the lands inhabited by the Celts. A reputation for feasting and a love of gold may have reinforced the connection. Since Herodotus places the Hyperboreans beyond the Massagetae and Isidones, both Central Asian peoples, it appears that his Hyperboreans may have lived in Siberia. Heracles sought the golden antlered hind of Artemis in Hyperborea. As the reindeer is the only deer species of which females bear antlers, this would suggest an Arctic or subarctic region. Following J.D.P. Bolton's location of the Isidones on the southwestern slopes of the Altai Mountains, Carl P. Ruck places Hyperborea beyond the Dzungarian Gate into northern Xinjiang, noting that the Hyperboreans were probably Chinese. Amber arrived in Greek hands from some place known to be far to the north. Avram Davidson proposed the theory that Hyperborea was derived from a logical, though erroneous explanation by the Greeks for the insects, which apparently originated in a warm climate, found embedded inside the amber arriving in their cities from cold northern countries. Unaware of the explanation offered by modern science, i.e. that these insects had lived in times when the climate of northern Europe was much warmer, their bodies preserved unchanged in the amber. The Greeks came up with the idea that the coldness of northern countries was due to the cold breath of Boreas, the north wind. So if one traveled beyond Boreas, one would find a warm and sunny land. Northern Europeans, Scandinavians, when confronted with the classical Greco-Roman culture of the Mediterranean, identified themselves with the Hyperboreans. This aligns with the traditional aspect of a perpetually sunny land beyond the north, since the northern half of Scandinavia faces long days during high summer, with no hour of darkness, midnight sun. This idea was especially strong during the 17th century in Sweden, where the later representatives of the ideology of Gothicism declared the Scandinavian peninsula both the lost Atlantis and the Hyperborean land. Northern regions and their inhabitants have been called Hyperborean, without claims of descent from the mythological Hyperboreans. In this vein, the self-described Hyperborean Roman Company were a group of northern European scholars who studied classical ruins in Rome. Founded in 1824 by Theodor Panofka, Otto Magnus von Stackelberg, August Kestner, and Eduard Gerhard. In this sense, Washington Irving, in elaborating on the Astor expedition in the Pacific Northwest, described how while the fiery and magnificent Spaniard, inflamed with the mania for gold, has extended his discoveries and conquests over those brilliant countries scorched by the ardent sun of the tropics. The adroit and buoyant Frenchman and the cool and calculating Briton have pursued the less splendid, but no less lucrative traffic in furs amidst the Hyperborean regions of the Canadas, until they have advanced even within the Arctic Circle. The term Hyperborean still sees some jocular contemporary use in reference to groups of people who live in a cold climate. Under the Library of Congress classification system, the letter subclass PM includes Hyperborean languages, a catch-all category that refers to all the linguistically unrelated languages of peoples living in Arctic regions, such as the Inuit. Hyperborean has also been used in a metaphorical sense, to describe a sense of distance from the ordinary. In this way, Friedrich Nietzsche referred to his sympathetic readers as Hyperboreans in The Antichrist, written 1888, published 1895. Let us look each other in the face. We are Hyperboreans. We know well enough how remote our place is. He quoted Pindar and added, "Beyond the north, beyond the ice, beyond death, our life, our happiness." John G. Bennett wrote a research paper entitled The Hyperborean Origin of the Indo-European Culture in 1963, in which he claimed the Indo-European homeland was in the far north, which he considered the Hyperborea of classical antiquity. This idea was earlier proposed by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, whom Bennett credits in his The Arctic Home in the Vedas 1903, as well as the Austro-Hungarian ethnologist Karl Penka, Origins of the Aryans 1883. Soviet Indologist Natalia R. Guseva, and Soviet ethnographer S.V. Zharnikova, influenced by Tilak's The Arctic Home in the Vedas, argued for a northern Urals Arctic homeland of the Indo-Aryan and Slavic people. Their ideas were popularized by Russian nationalists. According to Jason Jeffrey, H.P. Blavatsky, René Guénon, and Julius Evola, all shared the belief in the Hyperborean polar origins of mankind and a subsequent solidification and devolution. Blavatsky describes the Hyperboreans as the origin of the second root race and as non-intelligent ethereal creatures that reproduced by budding. However, Jeffrey's account may contradict some theosophical tenets, as according to other authors like Santucci, theosophy sees the passage from one root race to another, as always, evolution, never devolution. Thus, the Hyperborean could not be superior to modern man. According to these esotericists, the Hyperborean people represented the Golden Age polar center of civilization and spirituality, with mankind, instead of evolving from a common ape ancestor, progressively devolving into an ape-like state as a result of straying, both physically and spiritually, from its mystical, otherworldly homeland in the far north, succumbing to the demonic energies of the South Pole, the greatest point of materialization. Robert Charroux first related the Hyperboreans to an ancient astronaut race of reputedly very large, very white people, who had chosen the least warm area on the Earth because it corresponded more closely to their own climate on the planet from which they originated. Miguel Serrano was influenced by Charroux's writings on the Hyperboreans. The influential Russian philosopher, mystic, and radical political theorist Alexander Dugin has touted ancient legends about the sunken city of Atlantis and the mythical civilization Hyperborea, in defense of his vision of a Russian empire that might span from Vladivostok in the east to Dublin at the western edge of Europe. He believes Russia is the modern-day reincarnation of the ancient Hyperboreans, who need to stand at odds with the modern-day Atlanteans, the United States. Dugin long demonstrated a belief in Hyperboreans, having published the Hyperborean Theory 1992. As the sun sets on the legendary land of Hyperborea, we close this chapter of our mythical journey through time and imagination. If you've been captivated by the tales of Hyperborea and wish to embark on more explorations into the realms of myth, history, and mystery, we invite you to join our journey. Thank you for watching and for being a part of this incredible voyage. Until next time, keep the spirit of exploration alive, and may the mysteries of the past continue to enlighten our path forward.